This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, we learn what happens when you try to reach across the aisle in Hollywood. It ain't pretty. And we talk to film critic Peter Chattaway about the state of faith-based filmmaking. The Chosen, The King of Kings, House of David. There's a lot of change swirling around this particular genre, a lot of it for the good. Peter explains what's happening and what we might expect next.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Patti LuPone wants us all to get along. The Broadway legend recently opened up to George Clooney, himself a star on Broadway thanks to Good Night and Good Luck, about the sorry state of our United States. Here's what she had to say. What I don't understand about all of this in this country is that we can't seem to have dissenting views. You're labeled a communist. You're labeled a fascist. She's right. There's no denying it. Good for her.
And circle gets the square.
And then I did a quick Google search on Patti LuPone and found some things which were a little inflammatory. Turns out that she previously compared Christians on the right to Al-Qaeda. That's a little nasty. That's a little bit more than saying you have a dissenting point of view. It's ugly. She also invoked the attack on Senator Rand Paul, a conservative, by his neighbor. That happened a few years ago. Rand Paul lost part of his lung. He nearly died from that exchange. It was pretty ugly. And she basically shrugged her shoulders over it and said, maybe that guy had the right idea. She shared that on Twitter. Kind of ugly. And she said some other things as well, which were less than inclusive, let's just put it that way. So I don't think she's really practiced what she's preaching right now. And shame on her for that.
Maybe being a hypocrite is what it is.
But I think you have to stand back a bit and say, it's not just a Patti LuPone. It's people like Patti LuPone, the modern left. The modern left is absolutely responsible for two things which have shut down debate: woke and cancel culture. There's no denying it. There may be a person or two on the right who's been part of that toxic trend. Generally speaking, when it comes to woke and cancel culture and shutting down opposing views, it's the left doing it. It's Patti LuPone's left. Think about how many conservatives have graced college campuses and been treated less than fairly, screamed off campus, shut down, physically attacked. I don't think they want dissenting views. Do you? Or maybe a perfect example is Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines has spoken out against having trans women in competing against biological women. She's walked the walk. She's seen what happens firsthand when this occurs, and she's against it. So what happens when she pops up in a public forum? Well, it's not pretty. Those weren't Charlie Kirk fans who were chasing her down and trying to silence her by any means necessary. It was Patti LuPone types. That's what's going on in the country right now. And the fact that she can't see that, it's unbelievable. But I want to bring up maybe the perfect example of where dissenting views, reaching across the aisle, someone has done that. Someone has actually carved out a special niche in his career to do just that. And he's a person of the left. It's Bill Maher. Bill Maher has been scorching President Donald Trump for 10 years now. He's been attacking conservatives for that long. He says he'll never vote for Republicans. And yet, as much as he hates Donald Trump, he recently broke bread with Donald Trump.
Could you pass the salt?
Of course, that made a lot of news headlines, understandably so, and you could agree or disagree with what he said afterwards, but he did it. He reached out. He tried. He tried to get along. It's what he's been doing for quite some time now. He's been talking to people like Kid Rock, Dave Rubin. We just mentioned Riley Gaines. He had her on our show. He has been aggressively courting people on the right and having fair and honest and open dialogues with them. And sometimes they disagree, and sometimes the voices raise a little bit. But at the end of the day, they emerge as friends, and probably a little stronger as a result. It's a wonderful thing. And while my fellow conservatives are often thinking, that Bill Maher, all he does is bash Republicans. Well, and there's certainly truth to that, but can't you appreciate what he's been doing? Well, you know what? Not everyone can. And one person actually seems to be not a fan of Bill Maher's outreach efforts. His name is Larry David, and he recently took to the pages of the New York Times, pretty big newspaper, to call Bill Maher Hitler for having dinner with the real Hitler, Donald Trump. Now, that op-ed is important for a couple of reasons. One is it might be the first time that Larry David has been this screechingly unfunny. That's pretty rare. Dude's a comedy genius for sure. I also thought that Bill Maher's response to that op-ed was more or less perfect.
I think the minute you play the Hitler card,
That's what I think.
you've lost the argument.
Yes.
But I wonder if all this will pierce Patti LuPone's liberal bubble. Does she realize that Bill Maher has been doing exactly what she's been asking for such a long time? Does she realize that he was swatted down in a very public forum by a very big star? Does she realize that he's trying to hear and promote the exchange of dissenting views, exactly what she said? I don't think so. I don't think that really crossed her mind. I just don't. I think she's all talk. And it's a shame because we need more talk, but she's maybe not a fan of it. About a decade ago, I visited the set of not one but two faith-based films, Mom's Night Out and Cage No More. Man, so much has changed since then. Now, both those films didn't make a splash at the box office, more like a ripple, I guess you could say. It didn't cut through the zeitgeist. It happens, no fault of these particular films, but faith-based movies back then, it wasn't quite as robust as it is now. And boy, is it as robust as possible when you think about it. In recent weeks, you've seen a hit like The King of Kings in theaters, with a lot of big names in the cast, including Ben Kingsley. House of David is on Prime Video doing quite well. I think they just greenlit a second season. That was pretty quick. The Chosen is an absolute sensation. Not only is it very popular, not only has it spread across the globe, but they keep putting the show into theaters and people keep coming to see it in droves. Big numbers. Again, this is a TV show. If you want to see it, you could wait a few more weeks. It'll pop up on your small screen. But no, the fan base needs to see it, needs to see it now. This space is changing, it's growing, it's maturing, and even big players like Netflix and Prime Video, they want to get on board too. It's why I wanted to invite Peter Chattaway on the show. I've known Peter for years, sort of digital sense. We follow each other on social media. He's a film critic and historian, and he kind of gets and understands the film space we're talking about, faith-based storytelling. Now, I know there are quibbles here. Some people don't like the term faith-based. I mean, most of America is faith-based, and we're not really labeled as such. But I think for the purposes of this conversation, we'll kind of use that label and stick with it. Peter talks about some of these shows, why they're successful, what we might see next, and much more in this conversation. I do hope you enjoy it. And a quick caveat, if I look a little disheveled in this video, not that I'm ever marquee beautiful, but if I look a little bit under the weather, it's because I was under the weather. I've had a nasty cold for about a week. I didn't want to put off my interview with Peter Chattaway, so I just charged ahead with it. But I'm a mess. I look a mess. I apologize. I don't even know what I sound like, but I'm sure the questions are perfectly audible. But just know that I was not at my best, and I apologize. But as they say in Hollywood, the show must go on. Peter, thanks for joining the show. You know, I really wanted to talk to you about faith-based storytelling in general. You know this area quite well. And it's funny, I guess about a decade or so ago, I was on the set of Mom's Night Out and also Cage No More. I think it was just Caged at the time. That's with Kevin Sorbo. The other one was with Patricia Heaton. And, that was really the infancy of this kind of storytelling. Obviously, there have been epic films in the past, but sort of what we're looking at now is this overtly faith-based, faith-friendly, small budgets. The acting could be a little rougher on the edges, to be kind. Yeah. And, to go from there and to see where we are today, it's pretty remarkable. From your perspective, how would you kind of gauge the growth? What do you think is happening with this genre right now. And I know even people don't even like the term faith-based because a lot of people are people of faith, and why should you label it? But we'll push that aside for now.
Yeah, well, I mean, faith-based is a bit of a euphemism. It usually refers to Christian film, but then that gets you into all sorts of interesting discussions, like what is Christian and what isn't. And I mean, it's very often been associated with evangelical Christian film, but there's a lot of crossover now between evangelicals and Catholics. You know, The Passion of the Christ was a massive hit, a very Catholic film, but it was very embraced by evangelicals. And now you have The Chosen, which is directed by an evangelical, but the star of the show is Catholic. So, and then to make it even more complicated, The Chosen was originally produced by Angel Studios, which has some LDS affiliation, and that was very controversial for some of the fans of the show. And so Dallas Jenkins has had to go out of his way to say that I'm the one in charge. I make the decisions. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks theologically. And it's anyway. And of course, it begs the question: what about Jewish or Muslim films? I mean, are those faith-based or is faith-based? Anyway, that's a whole definitional. I could talk definitions forever. Mom's Night Out. It's interesting that your memory goes back that far, because for me, the whole faith-based thing goes back to the 90s. I don't know if you remember this, but the first faith-based film to crack the top 10 at the box office was The Omega Code in 1999. And it did it on only a few hundred screens. And I remember at the time, it was like a big, I was reading Entertainment Weekly at the time. I was just getting started as a film critic myself. I had just finished university a couple years earlier. And I remember there was this sort of buzz. There was like, wait, what is this? What is this Omega Code? What is, and it's not a great film, but it does have a juicy, what's the word? A wonderfully hammy performance by Michael York as the Antichrist. He's one. It's as bad films go, it's kind of entertaining on that level. But the fact is, with just a few hundred screens, it cracked the top 10, and so it got a sequel a couple years later, and the sequel bombed. And then of course, that was around the time The Prince of Egypt had come out. And I wouldn't call The Prince of Egypt a faith-based film, because to me it feels very mainstream, but it is based on the Bible. And Jeffrey Katzenberg went out of his way to reach out to Jewish, Christian, and Muslim moviegoers to make sure that the film would appeal to all three faiths. And it was only like 5 years later that The Passion of the Christ came out, and it was massive, and it got people thinking. But then, Hollywood wasn't used to this, and so after Passion of the Christ, well, how do we replicate this? What lessons do we take from this? And so it took some years before they finally began to find other things to do. In 2013, you had the Bible miniseries, which was huge on the History Channel. And so huge. I mean, The Chosen is a big success in its own way. But, I mean, think back to 2014. The Bible miniseries was so big that they took the last 5 episodes and re-edited them into a feature film about Jesus called Son of God. And that film, which consisted almost entirely of footage that people had already seen at home, grossed $60 million.
Wow.
And it was essentially a reissue of a TV series. The Chosen's made like 100 million or so now, but that's because they've put out 8 different things. But the Son of God, all on its own, grossed 60 million 11 years ago. So that was massive. And then after 2014, and then there was a brief flurry in 2016, you had Risen and The Young Messiah. There was a remake of Ben-Hur that flopped because it wasn't very good. And then after 2016, the biblical thing sort of faded away. But then very shortly after that, the Irwin brothers made I Can Only Imagine, and that was massive. And then the Irwin brothers struck their deal with Lionsgate. So suddenly you had a faith-based production company that had a solid mainstream distributor. Lionsgate isn't one of the major distributors like Warner or Sony, but it's there's another word for it. Like I forget the exact word, but it's almost major. It's big enough. It's the studio behind Hunger Games and John Wick. So they've got box office clout when they need it. And so the Irwin brothers have been working with Lionsgate ever since, and so they did Jesus Revolution and The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, and along the way they've more and more actors, mainstream actors, getting involved in some of these projects. I have to thank you, actually. By the way, I don't follow the comedy scene anywhere near to the degree that you do, but because of your podcast, I checked out the show Crashing with Pete Holmes.
Oh, it's a wonderful show.
Yeah, and so when Pete Holmes was cast in the Best Christmas Pageant Ever, I could go, I know who that is, and I could see why he would be interested in that project and why they would be interested in him. So yeah,
I mean, I thought it was interesting when it was Jennifer Garner was in Heaven is for Real.
No, Miracles from Heaven.
Yeah, Miracle. I'm sorry. Yeah,
similar title, but Greg Kinnear was in Heaven is for Real. Yeah.
But those felt like moments in a way that these fairly mainstream actors were kind of getting involved with those movies, because up until then it was you just didn't recognize a lot of the faces. I mean, I look at this space and think I don't want to pick on names, and I just think it's maturing. Like I think that the people. You make enough movies, you get better and better. And, you know, I mean, I thought that the Best Christmas Pageant Ever was a wonderful film, and no reservations. Like that was a wonderful movie, sweet movie. And I don't think that would be possible 10 years ago. So I think it's that. I think big actors. I think, you know, The House of David is with Prime Video. Netflix, I'm not sure what their projects are exactly, but I think they're doing something in the faith-based space as well.
Yeah. Well, the House of David thing's interesting because according to John Irwin, he was given complete creative control of it, which it's kind of amazing that like a major streamer like that would greenlight a thing like that and give him that kind of control, if that's accurate. And I have no reason to doubt that it is. That is kind of amazing. The Netflix, Netflix is interesting. Netflix, they have started dipping their toe in these waters as well. Like last year, they had a docu-series about Moses, and it was another sort of interfaith one. They had talking heads from Jewish, Christian, and Muslim backgrounds, but it was a biblical, subject matter, and it did really well. They released it before Passover last year, and then they bought a film called Mary, which is sort of a nativity movie, and that one came out in December, and it was a big hit for like a week or two, and then it sort of fell off because it's a very strange movie. There are things that I find interesting about it, but it's like the Nativity as action movie where Joseph is literally like taking up arms against people who are trying to chase the Holy Family, and it's not your standard sort of thing. But they struck a deal with Tyler Perry. He's going to be making a movie called R&B, which is a modernization of the Book of Ruth. About a year or two ago, they hired a guy named Dan Lin to oversee their film. And I'm curious to see what effect this has on things, because Dan Lin, I don't know about right now. Like I hate to talk about people's private beliefs and so forth, but Dan Lin has given interviews, like in the New York Times. He described himself as religious, and he's spoken at Biola, and he seems to be faith affiliated in some way. And after he arrived at Netflix, he restructured the company and gave his vice presidents various titles, and one of them is in charge of faith-based. So that's actually a genre that Netflix under this new leadership is now recognizing. Yeah. But we're still sort of waiting to see what comes of that.
Well, I want to talk about The Chosen. From the jump, I saw the first couple of seasons. I drifted away. I have a lot of content to watch for my job, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. I think the reviews were solid. I mean, I don't see any sort of creative drop off. And you kind of mentioned this a little bit, where there was some friction. Who's making the series? What is the point of view? But I feel like in our age where we're angry about everything, that really has not been the dominating conversation. It's just like, we love The Chosen. It's got a rabid fan base. The people will go out and see it in theaters because they want to see it before before it debuts on their small screen app. Talk about what's working there, because it really, it seems like everything's working, for lack of a better phrase. But you can be more eloquent than me.
When something gets that large, there's more opportunities for friction, and various controversies have erupted. And some of them I only hear about because Dallas Jenkins puts out videos responding to the controversies. And I think, oh, that was a controversy? I had no idea. Yeah. Even the fact that they're putting the show out in theaters has been controversial, because there are a number of fans who either can't afford to see it in theaters, or, initially, I think even now, the current season, only part 1 is playing overseas in theaters, because there just wasn't a big enough audience. There's always a drop off. Like part 1 has a certain level, and then part 2 and 3. And apparently part 1 overseas only opens so high compared to what it does in America. So overseas, they're just not even bothering with parts 2 and 3. So if you're a fan of The Chosen overseas, you have to wait for streaming. Meanwhile, fans in North America have seen it on the big screen, and all the spoilers are out there, and you have to hide. You have to hide from the spoilers.
That's right.
And so there's already some tension in the fan base just around things like that, because it used to be the first 2 or 3 seasons. It used to be that Dallas would host live streams on YouTube or Facebook, and all the fans could gather together and experience the episode for the first time together. And so the fact that they're doing theatrical screenings for some people has been a break from that communal tradition.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I think is interesting. The fact that Dallas Jenkins is so transparent and so eager to talk to his fans directly, maybe that's kind of cut off some of the controversy at the knees in a sense. Because listen, we all fight if they make us feel a surfer a woman instead of a man, we all freak out for a couple of months. And I don't discount that there have been some arguments behind the scenes or with fans, but it doesn't overwhelm the project. I don't think,
I don't think so. I mean, I do think. I mean, there are times I think the makers of the show are a little too transparent. There are times I'd be happy to just sort of experience the story and sort of soak it in and interpret it for myself. And sometimes I feel like, The Chosen's social media presence is always saying, "You will feel this. You will," And it's like, no, let me feel it the way I want to feel it. But it's something we've never really seen before, like an ongoing series. People speculating what's going to happen in the next season. I mean, we've just never seen that before, and it gets weird though. As a lifelong Christian, I feel a bit weird when I see people talking about how they're shipping the disciples. Ooh, is something going to happen between Matthew and Mary Magdalene? And it's like, I mean, these are actual historical figures, and I've never thought about them this way. But now we're treating them the same way we treat characters on Star Trek or whatever.
I think that when you think about pop culture, I've been arguing for decades that it matters. And I always mention the racial haircut from Friends. Everyone wanted the racial haircut. And the reason why a lot of storytellers put messages in their movies and TV shows is they want to shape public opinion. They want to kind of alter it in any way. Is there any way to quantify what a show like The Chosen has meant to the culture at large? It's a wildly unfair question, but I just want to get any thoughts you have on that. I mean, listen, if you're a Christian, you're enjoying the show. It's quality entertainment. It speaks to your values. I get that. But is it possible it's also roping in other people who maybe their faith isn't that strong, and all of a sudden they're watching episode after episode and they're reevaluating things?
That's what I hear. I mean, people who aren't Christian or haven't thought about it, apparently a lot of them do watch the show and like the show. The show is trying to be, I mean, the show has a very distinctive style, but it's also trying to be sort of an all things to all people. Like it has carefully avoided certain controversies, like certain topics that would divide different groups of Christians, for example. It's steered clear of some of that. And because the fan base is so huge, I mean, people take away different things from the show. It's hard to say that there's any one effect that the show is having, aside from simply raising the profile of this kind of material. I'm avoiding the word content. I religiously avoid the word content, but I can say material, this kind of material.
That's fine.
And certainly, the fact that, I mean, I think it's been interesting to see House of David now come along, because House of David apparently is really big as well. House of David is very different from The Chosen. It has some overlap stylistically. I mean, I'm a nitpicker for grammar and idioms and things, and so when I hear characters in Bible movies say things like, "You keep telling yourself that, okay," which is what somebody said in House of David, I think, oh, nobody said okay back then. I know that nobody spoke English either, but you can bend and you can break, and there's a
spell you cast, and if you kind of use the modern idiom, it does definitely.
Charlton Heston had a lot of praise for the writer on the final script polisher on Ben-Hur, because he chose phrases that sounded a little exotic, but not too exotic. You can understand them, but anyway, whatever. That's a whole other subject.
Yeah, that was interesting.
But House of David's very different, though, in the fact that House of David really leans into being like a fantasy series. With Goliath being super massive. I mean, I would argue much more massive than he is in the Bible, but it leans into other things that are in the Bible about like angels coming down and mating with human women. That's in Genesis 6. And it also brings in Jewish legends that I actually had never heard before until I saw House of David, and I wondered, where did that come from? So, apparently, in the book of Ruth, Naomi has two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. And I don't know if you know this, but Orpah is where Oprah gets her name from.
I didn't know that, no.
Yeah. And Ruth is the daughter-in-law who comes with Naomi back to Bethlehem, back to Judea. And Orpah is the daughter-in-law who stays in Moab. Well, apparently in Jewish tradition, Orpah became the mother of Goliath. That's in some of the traditions. And so in House of David, Orpah is the mother of Goliath and his brothers. I had never encountered this before.
Yeah.
And even the way it shows the angels and the humans mating when it has a big flashback in episode 6, they introduce one or two details that come from the book of Enoch, which is another non-biblical text. And so House of David is made by Christians. I believe it's accurate to call them evangelical Christians, but it's bringing in a lot of Jewish legends and mixing it in there, and which I think is really interesting. And that's certainly probably what I would have done if I were making the show. But not too long ago, that would have been very controversial for a Christian fan base. Like what is this non-biblical stuff doing in there? And
maybe the audience is maturing along with the storytellers as well, where we're more forgiving, more accepting, where we're kind of embracing creative license. All right. So we're talking about Lionsgate, we're talking about Netflix, Prime Video. These are all major players, and they're getting in this space. But I've been covering this for years, and you have as well, obviously. And there have been roadblocks along the way. There have been actors who are a little reticent, to say the least, of sharing that they're people of faith. I could go on and on. I mean, Kevin Sorbo is a classic example. He's a Christian conservative, and he lost his agent, doesn't work in Hollywood anymore. So are there roadblocks still remaining in this space? I mean, obviously there's a lot of progress, but what's happening now, and how would you kind of gauge it?
Roadblocks. I don't know. I mean, people who make movies want to make money, and the more money they spend making things, the more incentive they have to make sure they get the money back. Yeah. And so people will tend to avoid certain controversies. And I mean, you can see this, some of the biggest faith-based hits, I've actually been a little critical of for avoiding certain controversies. Jesus Revolution was one of the biggest recent faith-based hits. And one of the main characters in that film is a guy who in real life was sort of living a double life. And as he was ministering, he also had this sort of secret lifestyle. And around 1990, he died of AIDS. And I knew all about this because there was a documentary about him about 20 years ago. A friend of mine made that documentary called Frisbee, The Life and Death of a Hippie Preacher. So when Jesus Revolution came along, its treatment of that character felt very sanitized to me. It didn't directly mention any of that. And the closest it got was when the character said, well, when I lived in San Francisco, we did everything and everyone, which is a very generalized comment, and because I think the filmmakers might have been reluctant to sort of introduce how complicated that guy's story was to their audience. Yeah. But also, I think so. There's the Christian audience to be aware of, and I think they also maybe didn't want to offend perhaps the non-Christian audience, which might think that, well, if you're going to approach certain topics, you have to do it a certain way. And so I think there is a tendency to sort of play it safer on certain issues.
Gotcha. One last question: is there anything kind of on the horizon that you're looking forward to seeing in this sort of space? Projects, TV shows, movies, or anything that comes to mind?
I'm going to mention two. I think I can only think of two for sure right now, but one of them.
Two's good.
What's that?
Two's good.
Two is good. Okay, well, three is like the holy number. That's what you want. That's what you want to do. But
rule 3.
Yeah. There's a show called The Promised Land. Have you seen? They released one episode, like a pilot episode, last summer.
No.
Oh, okay. One of the assistant directors on The Chosen has started a series called The Promised Land. He did a pilot episode he put it out on YouTube. You can watch it now on YouTube last summer. And he's now finished shooting the first season. He got money for the first season. A few actors from The Chosen are in it. And the concept behind it is, what if you did Moses in the Exodus, like after they cross the Red Sea, once they're trudging across the desert. What if you did Moses and the journey to the Promised Land in the style of The Office? And so it's sort of a mockumentary, and it's very deadpan. Wow. Yeah, no, it's. And I interviewed the director of the show, and he said that basically the idea behind the show was you have like Moses, a leader who doesn't want to lead, leading a people who don't want to be led, and so it's. I'm very curious to see where future episodes go. The first episode was brilliant because it got into Jethro's visit to Moses, which is in Book of Exodus chapter something. It's between the Red Sea and Mount Sinai. So in there, and the fact that Moses was taking leadership advice from his father-in-law, it's sort of it just lends itself to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm very curious about is a movie coming out around Christmas from the director of Sound of Freedom. It's called Zero AD, and I don't like that title because there is no year zero. I'm sorry, I'm a history buff. In the calendar, it goes from 1 BC to AD 1. There is no year zero. And that, so it bugs me that the title, the movie had a working title of Bethlehem, and they announced the new title just a week ago. So this is a week or two ago. So this is still sort of a fresh wound for me. But basically, it's from the director of Sound of Freedom, and it's another sort of action movie. Well, not action movie, but thriller is the word they've used. It's a thriller take on the Nativity. It looks like Jim Caviezel is playing King Herod, but he's got like Colin Farrell as the Penguin makeup on. If I'm reading the trailer correctly, and Sam Worthington plays Herod's son, and the imagery in the trailer is fantastic, and I'm very curious to see how that is. I just wish they picked a title. It's like years ago there was a movie, I forget the exact title, but it was called Krakatawa East of Java or something, and in real life it's actually west of, or maybe I got it reversed. But it's one of those things that like fans of bad movies like to talk about, the fact that the title got the geography wrong.
That's right. Well, that reminds me, when I was a kid, someone, I don't know if this is a true story, they were trying to sell a Chevrolet car in maybe Mexico or Hispanic country, and they were selling the Nova. And Nova means don't go, or don't, so, there are cultural problems. But listen, we have a lot of time between now and December. And
but they meant Nova in the Latin sense, meaning new, right? Or I think it's not. I think it's Latin. Anyway, it means new. Nova Scotia, New Scotland, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, Peter, thank you so much for joining the show and sharing these perspectives. I have not been dipping a toe in the faith-based material area for a while, and I knew you'd kind of bring it, and I really do appreciate that. And you can check out your Substack page. It's Thoughts and Spoilers. I love that title, to get your thoughts on pop culture, faith-based films, and much more. You're a very keen and savvy person when it comes to this space, and I appreciate that your sort of dispassionate point of view. Even when you're offended by certain grammatical errors, you stick to the facts, and that's always important. But thanks again, and let's touch base. Maybe we'll touch base closer to the end of the year when that particular film is about to hit theaters.
Yep, sure.
Your character actor of the week is David Keith. Well, that's it for the show this week. Again, I am recovering from a nasty bug. Boy, when you have a one-man operation like Hollywood in Toto Inc., you just can't afford that. I've been a bit of an Iron Man in recent years. I never get sick. My whole family gets sick around me. When COVID came, I never got it. But boy, this particular bug really kicked my butt. So apologize if I've been less than prolific in recent days, but I am back to mostly full strength. And of course, if you can, do check out HollywoodInToto.com. It is my website. It is now 11 years old. It is like the show, The Right Take on Entertainment. It's updated 7 days a week. I think I might have missed a day or two. I kind of use the Easter holiday as an excuse, but generally speaking, it is updated 7 days a week. News and reviews, commentary, all sorts of fun things, guest posts from artists who are trying to get their message to the masses. You name it, it's there. HollywoodInToto.com. And of course, thank you to Radio America for having me as part of their excellent podcast lineup. And I will see you all next week. Be good, be kind, have a wonderful weekend. That's doctor's orders.